Abimelech, the Bramble King, is the title of today's message, taken from Judges chapter 9, verses 1 to 57. We have three thoughts: brutal ambition for self-exaltation, prediction of downfall, 1 to 6, 7 to 21, and God's judgment, 22 to 57. We bring the scene at the end of the judgeship of Gideon in Judges chapter 8, 28 to 35. Thus was Midian subdued before the children of Israel, so that they lifted up their heads no more. And the country was in quietness 40 years in the days of Gideon. And Zerubbabel, the son of Joash, went and dwelt in his own house. And Gideon had 80 sons, and of his body begotten, for he had many wives. And his concubine that was in Shechem, she also bare a son, whose name he called Abimelech. And this is the man that we were going to see. And Gideon, the son of Joash, died in a good old age and was buried in the sepulchre of Joash his father in Ophrah in the Abiezrite. And it came to pass, as soon as Gideon was dead, that the children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Baalim, and make Baal-Berith their god. And the children of Israel remembered not their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of all their enemies on every side. Neither showed they kindness to the house of Zerubbabel, namely Gideon, according to all the goodness that he had showed unto Israel. The kindness of Gideon and his house, and what he did to deliver the people of Israel from the Midianites, was soon forgotten, after 40 years of quietness following the subduing of the enemy. The children of Israel turned again and went a-whoring after Baalim, and make Baal-Berith their god. And the children of Israel remembered not the Lord their God, who had delivered them out of the hands of their enemies on every side. They not only departed from the Lord to go after their idols, being unfaithful, they were hard-hearted, ungrateful, and forgetful of what God had done for them. The idolatry led them to great cruelty and barbarous behavior. They support a revolt by Abimelech against his own brethren, the sons of Gideon, and his mother's brethren spake of him in the ears of all the men of Shechem all these words. And their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, for they said, he is our brother. And they gave him 70 pieces of silver out of the house of Baal-Berith, wherewith Abimelech hired vain and light persons which followed him. So out of the house of their gods, they gave money to him so that he may form an army. So we see here the brutal ambition for self-exaltation. That was this man Abimelech, the son of Gideon, of the concubine from Shechem, who plotted and killed all the 70 sons of Gideon by the sword. Only Jotham, the youngest son, escaped, because he hid himself. And he went unto his father's house at Ophrah, and slew his brethren, the sons of Zerubbabel, being 80 persons upon one stone. Notwithstanding, yet Jotham, the youngest son of Zerubbabel, was left, for he hid himself. The ambition of this man Abimelech, the son of Zerubbabel, who went to Shechem, to his mother's brethren, and communed with them, and with all the family of the house of his mother's father, saying, I pray you, in the ears of all the men of Shechem, whether it's better for you either that all the sons of Zerubbabel, 80 reign over you, or that one reign over you. Remember also, I am your bone and your flesh. Abimelech got into authority and made himself great. His mother perhaps had instilled into his mind some towering, ambitious thoughts, and the name his father gave him, carrying royalty in it, might help to blow up these sparks. And now he has buried his father. Nothing will serve his proud spirit, but he will succeed him in the government of Israel. You see, remember when after Gideon subdued the Midianites, the people asked, will you rule over us? Gideon said that God will rule over you. And so Gideon returned to his place, and from there, he judged Israel, but there was no king in Israel. God is the one who ruled. And so this was the occasion, and this was the quietness that happened amongst the people for 40 years until this thing took place. Right? He had no call from God to dishonor as his father had, nor was there any present occasion for a judge to deliver Israel, as was during his father's time, when his own ambition must be gratified, and his gratification is all he aims at. So what did he do? He craftily got his mother's relations into his interests. Shechem was a city in the tribe of Ephraim, a notable city, and it was there that Joshua held his last assembly, and that city was set up, as it were, and he had an interest in the family of which his mother was, and by them he made an interest in the leading men of the city. So he came to the people, and he appeared to any one of them like a man of merit. But, well, we all see that he was indeed not a man of God at all. And it's frightening that he would choose to do this. And none would have dreamed of making such one king if he had not dreamed of it himself. Verse 3. And his mother's brethren speak of him in the ears of all the men of Shechem all these words, and their hearts inclined to follow Abimelech, and they said, he is our brother. None would have dreamed of making such a one king if he had not dreamed of it himself. And here we see how he willed them into the choice. Verse 2 and 3, he says here, he basically suggested that Gideon, having left 70 sons who had a good figure and had a good interest, they were designing to keep the power which their father had in their hands, and by joint influence to reign over Israel. So what they did was that if we have better one king than more, then many, then so many. So here you can see how he came out, and there was no reason to think how the affairs of the state should be managed by a single person, and Gideon's son at least had the intention to reign over Israel, and well, they had their father's mind that the Lord should reign over them, and so they stood where they were. And here you can see the ill design that came, and as for himself, he only puts them in mind of his relation to them, and how you remember he said, I am your bone and your flesh. The plot took wonderfully. The magistrates of Shechem were pleased to think of their city being a royal city and the metropolis of Israel, and therefore they inclined to follow him. So they said, he's our brother, and his advancement will be to our advantage. So you see, carnal men will rub shoulders with carnal men. And there you see how he got money from the idol worshippers of Baal-Berith, so that he would be able to form an army. So he enlisted his soldiers, and then he made himself king. So you see here how God was not consulted, and here you see that there was no advice made with the priest or with the brethren in any other city or tribe, but the Shechemites, as it were, the people came and made him king. So here you can see the beginning of a brutal ambition for self-exaltation. And what he did was that he would go on and reign in Millo. Millo is a council house a place where a state house, like the state house in Jerusalem, and that's what he did. And Abimelech rose to power by the shedding of much blood. So he killed all the 70 sons or 69 sons of Zerubbabel, of Gideon. And when a man depart from God, there's no telling the evil that one could do. So there was only one son that was spared or escaped. It was the youngest son. God sent Jotham to rebuke this half-brother. He did so by a parable, and his parable, Matthew Henry says, was indeed very ingenious, that when trees were disposed to choose a king, the government was offered to those valuable trees, the olive tree, the fig tree, the vine, and they refused, choosing rather to serve than rule, to do good than to bear sway. But the same tender being made to the bramble. The bramble accepted it. The bramble is the worst of all the plants. It's a thorn bush. It's a useless nuisance in the land. A thorn bush, good only for fuel, for the fire. And this was the symbol of Abimelech, the new king. Often in the summer, fires would break out in the bramble bushes, and these fires would spread and threaten the safety of the trees. So Jotham had made his point. Abimelech, the bramble king, would be unable to protect the people, but he would cause judgment to come that would destroy those who trusted him. The men of Shechem should have been ashamed of the way they rejected the house of Gideon and honored a worthless opportunist like Abimelech. Eventually, both Abimelech and his followers would destroy one another. God's judgment. That's the third thought. That's the third thought. The prediction of his downfall and the judgment. Verse 22, all the way to the end. When Abimelech had reigned 3 years over Israel, then God sent an evil spirit between Abimelech and the men of Shechem. The men of Shechem dealt treacherously with Abimelech, that the cruelty done to the 70 sons of Zerubbabel might come, and their blood be laid upon Abimelech their brother, which slew them, and upon the men of Shechem, which aided him in the killing of his brethren. So God's judgment came as predicted by Jotham. Whoso sheddeth a man's blood, by men shall his blood be shed. For in the image of God made he men. So the innocent cried out to God for vengeance and justice, right? Just as Abel cried out when he was killed by his brother Cain, just as the saints in the tribulation, though all who died, cried out to God for vindication. And they cried with a loud voice, saying, How long, O Lord, true and holy and true, dost thou not judge and avenge our blood on them that dwell on the earth? And in Genesis 4 verse 10, What hast thou done? The voice of thy brother's blood crieth unto me from the ground. And the men of Shechem set liers in wait for him in the top of the mountains, and they robbed all that came along that way by them, and it was told Abimelech. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, came with his brethren. So there was this man, Gaal, an outsider, who instigated the men of Shechem to turn against Abimelech. So here came an outsider, and he came and he tried to put confidence in the men of Shechem to turn against Abimelech. And so they went out to the field and gathered their vineyards and trod the grapes and made merry and went into the house of their God and did eat and drink and cursed Abimelech. And Gaal, the son of Ebed, said, Who is Abimelech and who is Shechem, that we should serve him? Is it not he, the son of Zerubbabel, and Zubal, his officer? Serve the men of Hamor, the father of Shechem, for why should we serve him? And would to God this people were under my hand, then I would remove Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, Increase thine army and come out. And so here, verse 29, And would to God these people were under my hand. Then would I remove Abimelech. And he said to Abimelech, increase thine army and come out. So there came a revolt. And Zabu, the ruler of the city, heard the words of Gaal, the son of Ebed. His anger was kindled. And he sent messengers unto Abimelech privily and said, behold, Gaal, the son of Ebed, and his brethren be come to Shechem, and behold, they fortify the city against thee. Now therefore up by night, thou and the people that is with thee, and lie in wait with the field. And it shall be in the morning, as soon as the sun is up, thou shalt rise early and set upon the city, and behold, when he and the people that is with him come out against thee, then thou mayest do to them as thou shalt find occasion. So you see here that there was not the disturbance from any outside invaders in Israel, but there was within Israel trouble. The Shechemites' counsel were betrayed to Abimelech by Zubal, his confidant, and the ruler of the city who continued haughty for him. His anger was kindled, and the more because Gaal had spoken lightly of him. For as we can see, if he had complimented and, well, we said, tried to caress him, then they would have gained his favor, his interest. But here we see how Abimelech and all that was said and done in Shechem was against him. So you can see that betrayers are often betrayed by some among themselves. And the cursing of the king is sometimes strangely carried by a bird of the air. And he prudently advises him to come against the city immediately and loses no time. And he thinks it best that he should march his forces by night into the neighborhood and surprise the city in the morning. Then take the best advantage. How could the Shechemites hope to speed in their attempt when the ruler of their city was in the interest of their enemy? They knew it, and they took care. They took no care to secure him. And so here you see, as God did to send an evil spirit among the people of Shechem, there was indeed trouble that came. And you see that when he came and he grew, it was out of malice, it was out of evil, and so it couldn't stand, it couldn't hold at all. So the story goes in verse 49, and all the people likewise cut down every man his bow and followed Abimelech, and put them to the hole, and set the hole on fire upon them, and so that the men of the tower of Shechem died also, 1,000 men and women. So here there was this tower of Shechem, where the people who were idolaters or worshippers all were gathered together, and then they formed a strong tower within the city. The people fled there, and Abimelech came, and there a woman cast a millstone, a piece of stone upon Abimelech's head, and all to break his scar. And he called hastily unto the young man, his armor-bearer, and said to him, draw thy sword and slay me, that men say not of me, a woman slew him. And his young man thrust him through, and he died. And when the men of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they departed every man unto his place. Thus God rendered the wickedness of Abimelech, which he did unto his father in slaying his 70 brethren, and all the evil of the men of Shechem did God render unto their heads. And upon them that came the curse of Jotham, the son of Zerubbabel. Those that retired into the stronghold of their idol temple were destroyed. They were called the men of the tower of Shechem. And Abimelech was gravely hurt when the woman threw a stone upon him and dropped down upon his head and asked his armor-bearer to thrust him with a sword. He died a tragic death. Conclusion. God's judgment came, as Longfellow said, though the mill of God grinds slowly, yet they grind exceedingly small. This was interlude in between the reign of Gideon and the reign of Jephthah, which we saw here in Judges chapter 9. It was an internal chaos that came when the people, God allowed this to happen, when the people revolt against God. You see, when we revolt against God, and when God is taken out of our hearts, that's where our minds turn nasty and evil and cruel, and that's what happened to the people after Gideon died. They went a-whoring after the gods of the land, and it was a very sad situation for the people of Israel when this happened, but God was still on the throne, and so the Lord did good to bring order back to the people of Israel. Amen.